I know, it's a cliche, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Christmas came a little early this year. The Sony A7S III. A compact, mirrorless body, and a low-light king. A 12-megapixel sensor, in-body image stabilization, and a whole lot of dynamic range. A new redesigned menu system and a flip-out screen. This Sony A7S III has been redesigned. Able to shoot in 120 frames per second and 4K high resolution reliably without overheating. Delivering cinematic video in a compact size. This is a damn near perfect camera. It's one of my favorite shirts. My wife actually got this for me last Thanksgiving. Everywhere I go, I get compliments for this shirt. It's a pretty cool shirt. It's like woven in. So yeah, it's finally here. The Sony A7S III. I've actually had this camera since mid-September or so. I think maybe mid to late September. And ended up buying a few accessories for it. I got a couple lenses, the digital mic on top, memory cards, and so forth. So if you guys have watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that I used to own the Canon R5, and I decided to actually return the Canon R5 for this Sony A7S III. And go watch that video if you haven't. I had a lot of issues with the Canon R5, or at least for me, the Canon R5 didn't work. I'm not saying the Canon R5 is a bad camera, but I just felt that the reliability wasn't there. So this camera is damn near perfect. I don't think I've ever had a camera quite like this. It's a mirrorless camera, but it's a video first camera, and it shoots video like a cinematic camera. It's like you have a little cinematic camera in your hand. This isn't going to be a technical review. I'm not going to jump into details about what this camera can and cannot do. There's a lot of videos out there that you guys can probably find on YouTube. Gerald Undone, for example, goes into a really detailed review. My review is just going to be kind of my perspective. I'm going to be comparing it to the Canon R5, although I think that's an unfair comparison. I don't think these cameras are... I don't want to say that they're not comparable, but they're two different cameras. And I'm just going to tell you what I like and what I guess I don't like about this camera. I can tell you off the bat that there's very little I don't like about this camera, and if I did have to pick things, what I am going to be telling you about in this video is really nitpicking it. There is one thing though that I think that Sony should definitely correct or implement in future releases, but we'll get to that. So this isn't a cheap camera. In the US it goes for about $3,500, and that's not including the lenses or the memory cards or anything else that you need for it. However, that is cheaper than the R5. And I bought the Sigma 20-40-70, and this is a 2.8 aperture. I love this lens. This lens is a really nice lens. The 20-40-70 is a much cheaper lens than the Sony G Master equivalent, but I don't think you're losing much by picking up the Sigma over the Sony. The Sigma is definitely really crisp, sharp. I don't have any problems with autofocus. It does a great job tracking me. I do think that the Sigma is sort of like an upgrade to the Sony lens, because the Sony lens is quite dated, and I think Sony should come out with a next iteration of that. So I bought the Sigma. I bought this Sony 1.8 20mm G lens. I guess the G stands for gangster, because this thing is one of my favorite lenses that I've ever bought. It's a perfect vlogger's lens. It gives you a little bit more of a wider view and distinguishes it from the 24mm from the Sigma. And I love the 1.8, right? That lets in a little bit more light. So this thing is light, it's small, it's compact. I think it's a perfect lens to go along with the Sony A7S III. I know there's a 24 equivalent, but I wanted the 20 because I had the Sigma. And then I also bought the digital mic that goes, you know, on top of the Sony A7S III. This thing's really cool. It's completely wireless. You don't have to worry about wires hanging. It pairs with the Sony A7S III perfectly. It's a digital mic. I think the Sony A7S III and maybe the Sony A7R IV are the only two Sony cameras right now that have the digital capabilities. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a Sony expert. I love this thing. And I ended up buying the CF Express Type A card, which I can tell you right off the bat is a whole lot more expensive than the Type B that the Canon R5 was taking. So keep that in mind. All right, so now I'm actually going to be switching over to the Sony A7S III to record the rest of this video. Okay, so I switched over to the Sony A7S III right now. I am shooting with the digital microphone. So let's talk about this camera a little bit more. Compared to the R5, it's really unfair to compare the two together because I feel like the R5, as I said in my earlier review, the R5 is a photo first camera with some video features. I think Canon did a horrible job marketing the R5. They were marketing the R5 as this photo and video powerhouse, and they were really emphasizing on the video part of things. Unfortunately, the R5 is unreliable when it shoots video, and that's mainly because of the overheating. Now, that's not to say it's a bad camera. It's definitely more of a photo first camera that will allow you to shoot some really good video at short intervals. That said, again, it's a great camera, it just wasn't the camera for me because of the overheating. This camera is the exact opposite. The Sony A7S III is a video first camera with some photo capabilities. Now, that's not to say that it can't shoot photos good. It shoots photos exceptionally well. As you guys know, the Sony A7S line is known for being a low light king, and that has a lot to do with the 12 megapixel sensor. So, what does that mean for you? Well, all that means is you won't be able to crop in as much as you'd like to, and you're not going to be able to shoot and blow out huge prints, right? We're talking about really large prints. Now, does that mean that this camera shoots horrible pictures? Absolutely not. Actually, this camera is going to give you two benefits. The first one being the low light, right? It's a low light king. And the second thing being that it has amazing dynamic range. So you're going to get great dynamic range. You're going to get great low light in both video and in pictures. The 12 megapixels is probably going to be more than enough for 75% of the users out there. If you're going to shoot a lot of pictures for content, web content, or social media content, this camera might be the perfect camera for you. 12 megapixels is actually just a little bit more than what you need for 4K video. So if you want to display pictures and photos on a 4K television screen, you're not going to be able to tell the difference with a 12 megapixel camera. Where you're going to get into trouble is when you start cropping into things or if you blow up really large prints. Now, you can still print fairly large pictures. You just can't do, huge sizes. You're gonna have to test that out for yourself and see where you're exactly comfortable with those prints. Take some sample pictures and get some cheap prints printed out and see what you like and kind of see where your boundaries are with this camera. But I think for 75% of the people out there, this camera might be the perfect camera for you. If I do need more megapixels, I'll probably use one of my other cameras, or I'll even rent an R5. I think if you're a photo first person, go get the R5. The R5 is probably the best photo camera right now. If you're looking for a video first camera with photography as a secondary thing, the Sony A7 III is definitely it. I think that they're two different systems. So let's talk more about this camera. What do I love about it? Well, right now I'm shooting on C-Log, and C-Log is fantastic. I love shooting in 10-bit, and I love the codecs. With the Canon, it was really hard to edit the videos. I don't know exactly why, but they were using some weird codec. The fan was blaring the entire time. It was a nightmare to edit, and you had to do proxies for everything. With the Sony, it's actually a lot easier to edit the videos. I do have to do proxies, primarily for the higher frame rates, like 60 or 120. But The 24p is pretty easy to edit 4K wise. So I really like that. Now, it's not, it's not like editing 1080p, but there's a huge difference between editing the R5 and the Sony A7S III. And I can tell you right now, the Sony A7S III Final Cut Pro seems to really like it a lot more than it did with the R5. The dynamic range on this thing is amazing. You can really push the boundaries, in C-Log 3 especially. You can really push the boundaries and really get that creative look that you're looking for. A lot of detail in the shadows. And, as you guys know, this is the low light king. Now, I think that's going to change in the future. Surprisingly, when I had the Canon R5, it was pretty good in low light. And I thought the dynamic range was pretty decent, considering you had a 45 megapixel camera. That being said, the dynamic range on this camera is better. It's noticeably better. But the Canon R5 wasn't too far, along when it came to low light. And I think we're going to start seeing that more with the camera manufacturers. We're going to see that low light is going to be achievable. I think in the future we might see a little bit more megapixels and still getting great low light. So other camera manufacturers may be catching up to Sony right now, but I think Sony, the A7S III is still the low light king. I don't think Sony has anything to worry about, but in the future, look out for it. I think that we're going to bridge that gap a little bit. The next thing that I love the body, which sounds kind of weird. The entire package is small. It's a lot smaller than the R5. Now, that being said, the ergonomics on the R5 were better. It did feel better in the hand, but there's a trade-off. The Sony body is smaller. It's more compact. I prefer either or. Anytime I pick up a Canon body, it feels right in the hand. I got big hands. It feels right. I can grab it. I know where all the buttons are, so it's very familiar to me. But it didn't take long for me to really adjust to the Sony. Next best thing that I love about this camera is obviously the reliability, which was a big thing for me with the R5. This camera is very reliable. It doesn't overheat. It gives me all of the video features in 4K that the R5 did, and in some ways better than the R5 did, with no reliability issues at all. It's been kind of hot here in California. Now, it wasn't as hot as the summertime when I had the R5, but we've seen some, 90-degree weather here and there. I have it on the default heat setting, and it never overheats. I've never had to switch it to the higher, heat setting. It's nice to know that if I did get into hotter climates, I could switch over to that setting, and it still would be reliable. It is a little bit warmer to the touch, and it's not hot. It's just warmer to the touch than the R5 was. So, there's definitely some heat there, but it's not overheating and it's working just fine. The R5 it wasn't even hot to the touch and it was overheating. So that's something to consider with this camera. All right, now there wasn't a lot of things that I could find that I didn't like about this camera, but I had to really think hard. So this is really nitpicking, and just bear with me here. The first thing that I would have to nitpick about is the menu system. Now, I know there's a lot of Sony people out there right now that are probably screaming at the screens and cursing me out, and I get it. I know Sony updated the menu system and they've improved on it dramatically, and this is the first camera to have the new menu system. But coming from Canon, you got to remember, I was a Canon guy for years and years and years. Canon still has a more intuitive system. Overall, the menu system's a little bit more intuitive. The buttons and layout are a little bit more intuitive. Now, I'm not saying that the Sony's bad. Like I said earlier, ergonomics, Sony has big pros, right? It's smaller, it's more compact. However, Canon just has everything kind of figured out a little bit better. The menu system on Canon is all there. It's right where you need it. It's simple. You get to everything that you need quickly, easily, and with the least amount of time. And I think it's mostly muscle memory with me, but I'm still getting used to the Sony system. It's not bad. It's not horrendous. I actually picked up the Sony A7S II, and that was horrendous. That menu system was confusing. I couldn't find anything. That was terrible. This system is a lot better, but compared to Canon, Canon still has an edge. I do give Sony props for listening to their customers and changing the system. That's a huge plus. Canon is kind of like Apple of the camera world, and Sony's kind of like the Android of the camera world. Canon has everything figured out for you. You don't really have to think about it. It's all there. It's laid out. You may not be able to customize it as much as you want to, but it's kind of already borderline perfect. With Sony, I can literally assign anything I want on the Sony system. I can change any button that I want. I can make custom buttons. I can even change the menu system, the display menu system to, display anything that I want. That's pretty cool. However, it can take a really long time to set all that up, and it can get kind of tricky and you can kind of lost. But I like that. I like that I'm able to customize everything. It really is user preference. I can see how people like either or. I can tell you that the menu system is a lot better. It's definitely a plus. It's only going to improve, I think, going forward. It's definitely a step in the right direction for Sony, and props to you for listening to your customers. So the next nitpicky thing that I have to talk about is actually the flip out screen. And again, I know Sony users have been waiting for the flip out screen for years. It's not a bad screen. It's a good screen. But again, compared to Canon, I came from Canon. The Canon flip out screen is slightly better. Canon, I think, was one of the first cameras to ever offer the flip out tilt screen. And so they've been doing it for quite a long time. The R5's flip out screen was beautiful. The resolution was nice and crisp. There was less glare on the screen, and it was a little bigger. I remember it being a little bit bigger, but that's actually not the thing that I'm kind of nitpicking about. With Canon, the touchscreen features on the flip out screen, you can touch anything that you want. You can pinch to zoom, the menu system's completely touch. Anything that you see on the screen, you can touch it, and it's completely intuitive. Again, with the Sony system, they've improved dramatically. The menu system is now completely touch. It has pinch to zoom. It has all those great features that you want, but it has these little weird issues. Example, right now I'm shooting this video. On the screen, I can see my shutter, I can see my aperture, I can see my ISO. There's a little bar at the bottom. I can't touch to change any of that. They want you to still use the wheel and change it manually. Kind of strange. It's not a deal breaker. Again, it's just me nitpicking. But, hopefully they can upgrade that with the firmware update, because the screen has the touch capabilities. It's just the menu, for whatever reason, doesn't let you change it. The other thing that I would kind of mention is there is a lot of glare, especially in the sun. You do get a lot of glare and reflections on the screen, so the coating's a little weird. But other than that, it rotates out, it tilts, it flips, it does everything that you want it to do, just like the Canon system. Honestly, it's only going to get better. This is the first camera to offer it. I would be really surprised if Sony doesn't offer this in the future releases. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect right off the gate, but good step forward. Again, Sony, props to listening to your customers. Okay, now, this is probably the biggest issue that I have with this camera. I don't feel like I'm nitpicking. I mean, you guys can tell me if I am or not. It's definitely an inconvenience. It goes back to my R5 review where, you spend a certain amount of money and you expect something, right? With the Canon systems, when you remove the lens, there's a window, this protective window that protects the sensor. And it actually slides down, and it's like a curtain. It prevents dust and all this other stuff from going in. The R5 had a really good system. I think for the R5 and the R6, they had upgraded it. But, Canon has this protection that they offer for their sensors. This Sony A7S III does not have it. When you take a lens off, the sensor's exposed. The sensor's exposed to anything. I found that kind of weird. For a $3,400 camera, $3,500 camera, they don't protect the sensor? That's kind of strange. With the Canon R5, I would see little dust particles land on the sensor, and then you would press the button and the little curtain would come down, and there you go, the dust was off of it. I think it's just a weird thing. I heard that they offer it on the A9, or is that right? The A9? I don't know why. I guess the A9's a high-end camera, but I really think the Sony A7S III is also a high-end camera. This is definitely on, this is definitely at the top tier level for Sony, especially for mirrorless cameras. So kind of weird. I hope that Sony kind of implements the sensor cleaning or protecting the sensor in the future. Again, that would probably be the only thing that I really don't like about this camera. It's more of an inconvenience than anything else. It's not a deal breaker at all. The camera's still amazing. So, you know, we're good. One of the biggest pros of this camera is the value of the whole thing. You are getting a small mirrorless body, compact mirrorless body that shoots cinematic video at a price point that is unbeatable. With the Canon R5, you know, I was somewhere in the ballpark of, I think, like after taxes and everything, like $6,500 with that system. That's with the RF 24-70 glass, the body, the memory cards, you know, everything. With the money that I was able to save with the Sony A7S III, I was able to buy 2 lenses. I was able to buy the memory card, the digital mic, you know, protective case, everything that I needed. And I think I still had like $100 to $200 to spare. Now, that being said, the RF glass, that 24-70 RF glass was fantastic. That was probably one of the best lenses I've ever had the pleasure of using. It's ginormous and it's heavy and it's this really big clunky lens, but it had image stabilization. It was crystal clear. The bokeh was amazing. I love that lens. That RF lens was really hard to return. And I think with the Canon RF system, that's their market right there, is they have some really beautiful RF lenses. Now, that being said, the Sigma 24-70 is still a fantastic lens. It doesn't have the image stabilization, but it's only $1,000. I mean, you're getting an incredible value. I feel like the value that I got purchasing this Sony A7S III and all the features that I got with it, I definitely got my money's worth. You're probably saying, well, the Canon R5 was able to shoot 8K video. I mean, you know, what's going on with that? Yeah, that's true. The 8K video was a really cool feature that the Canon R5 had. The files were huge, and I probably would have never used it. So how does this camera compare to the Canon R5? Because the Canon R5 shot great video, don't get me wrong, and the slow motion was nice, the 120 was nice, you know, it was a good camera. But the Sony A7S III, I think, does everything better than what the Canon R5 did in 4K. But let me explain that real quick. I think the Canon R5's 4K HQ mode, and that's a downsampled 8K, right? It downsamples the 8K footage into this 4K HQ mode. Man, that was beautiful. That was one of the best 4K images you could get, hands down. But it was taxing, right? It caused it to overheat, still had really large files, and so forth. The 4K on the Sony isn't quite as good as the R5's HQ mode 4K, but if you compare the R5 standard 4K versus the Sony A7S III standard 4K, yeah, the Sony A7S III blows it out of water. It's noticeably better. In post, you can actually sharpen up the Sony a little bit more, and you can kind of get that HQ look. You can also do that with the Canon. So, you know, is it a gimmick? No. You know, I want to give Canon their props, and that was a really nice, you know, footage. But everything else, the Sony just trumps on the Canon 4K. The 120 here it's smoother. It's a lot smoother. I like it. You can actually record sound with the 4K 120, with 4K 60. The frame rates are just smoother. I prefer the slow motion on the Sony that I did on the R5. And I don't know, that might be the codec, that might be the compression that the R5 had. I don't know, but the R5 slow motion wasn't quite as nice as the Sony has right now. Again, you're getting better dynamic range, you're getting better low light. I think overall, you're just getting a better video camera for 4K. Obviously, this thing can't shoot 6K or 8K, but I really don't miss it. I don't see myself needing anything higher than 4K right now for at least a few years. I think, yeah, the market's moving towards higher resolution. You need more memory, you need a better computer, you're gonna have more editing time. I'm good where I'm at right now. Another thing to talk about is obviously the colors, right? So Canon's known for having their Canon colors, and Sony has been known for kind of being off a little bit in the color science. I still think the Canon's color science is better than the Sony's, but I can tell you that previously when I used to look at footages, especially the standard profiles and such on old Sony cameras, I didn't like the colors at all. With this camera, the colors have improved dramatically. I don't think they're quite at the level that Canon is at, and I think that's more of a preference. I think everyone's going to have different preferences. Again, I came from Canon. I'm used to seeing Canon colors, so it might be just an adjustment period for me, but I don't think it really matters because they're not off that much. And, you know, especially if you're shooting in log and you're going to color correct anyways, you can achieve the color that you want. Anyone can achieve any color that they want. Great job, Sony, for listening to your customers, and you've improved on that as well. The new door mechanisms that they have for all the ports they're really nice. Full-size HDMI cable, that's a huge plus. Again, that's definitely a sign that this is a video-first camera. All that is great. I think this camera is just loaded with features. So that's basically it for me. That's my review. I am psyched about this camera. I absolutely love it. I've been taking videos and photos since I bought it. I haven't been able to put it down. I'm definitely going to have a lot more content going forward. I've been testing out the photo capabilities. I love the photo capabilities. I've been testing them out. I've been ordering some prints, and so far they all look great. So this is a great camera. I'm telling you, I've never owned a camera that's been this close to perfect. If you bought this camera, I think you made the right decision personally. If you pre-ordered this camera, it's definitely worth the wait. You know, and if you didn't, that's okay too. The camera world is getting super competitive. If you bought an R5 and it's working for you, then it's the perfect camera for you and you made the right decision. I just feel like I got a really good investment. So that's it for me. I hope you guys like this review. I hope you found it informative, and hopefully my perspective on things can help you make the right decision. If you like this video, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Definitely comment below. I love reading the comments. I would love to hear you guys' opinions, and look out for another video real soon. So thank you guys for watching.